And a lot of people say that's the first thing is like, how do you work in schools? It must be like mad. How do you cope with the kids that do my head in? And there is days where the kids are like, they will do your head in. They will make you frustrated. They'll get you to a point where sometimes you start questioning like, oh, am I doing the right job, or am I making an impact, or I'm actually going to make a change in this person? But they're innocently hanging out in gangs in and around the school, just in big groups. But then from there, that's when trouble starts to happen, because you look at the point, so you're employed by the school to provide a service, to look after young children, to help this young person grow in front of you. And all that's in your mind is, I can take advantage of this child. Like I can't really explain how it makes me feel. And all I wanted to do was go into the room and rip his head off.
I always kind of wear green now on the show.
Yeah.
And I realize like there's got to be some sort of consistency to it all.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of just like, this is my thing now.
Yeah.
This green shirt.
Yeah. It's your out.
Yeah.
It's your podcast out.
I've got 2 of them. I might get more just in case.
Yeah.
So like, well, this is my shirt for the show. Every thumbnail, everything, just going to this is a green t-shirt. Yeah.
I just identify you as being that podcast. Like, yeah. The one in the green tee.
But yeah, I always just kind of crack on in this sort of quite natural and organic way, because right now nobody knows who we are.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
We're just a couple of random folks, you know what I mean? But we do want to know who you are actually. So Joel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So although this is Confessions of a Personal Trainer, I'm going to be talking to like lots of different types of individuals. And what's quite interesting and unique about you, and why I wanted you on the show, is because you do something very, very, in my opinion, very, 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 very important for a living. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what that is?
So I am a PE teacher, currently now head of year as well, so a dual role. But yeah, been doing that for 7 years now. But we started off on the same journey in the same gym.
That's right. The waterfront leisure centre.
Yeah, when you were a very different mus. But yeah, always kind of lent towards working with young people, just showing the importance of physical activity and exercise for a healthier lifestyle, how beneficial it can be, just not on the physical aspects, but like mentally how you feel. So it's just something that I was always interested in. Something just I'm working with younger children, kind of guiding them and showing them the ways. Just something that's always appealed to.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good question actually. Like, was there a point of inspiration where you were kind of just like, there was a moment that kind of made you think, you know what, I think that'd be a really good idea for me to pursue that?
So I think I had it in school, but I didn't realize it until I started working at the gym. So I was quite overweight from year 7 all the way through school, really. So the most support I had in my school was from my PE teachers, and it was more than just like helping me through lessons and looking after me in school. It was like teaching me the importance of physical activity, trying to get me to do more, and without directly saying, you need to do more. So it was like the way they approached things, the way they looked out for me, basically. And I saw the impact on the rest of the class and how much everyone enjoyed the lesson when they were in PE. And I was like, this is something I want to do. Like, I want everyone to enjoy lessons like this. I want to be able to teach a class and everyone really, really enjoy it. And then I got older, I got to 6th form, and then kind of looked, at the time, I wasn't ready for university. So I was 17, 18, leaving 6th form, and was done with education. I just couldn't be bothered to do anything else. And I started getting into my fitness personally. So I was like, okay, I'll go down the fitness route. Started doing my courses to get my gym qualifications. I ended up in Waterfront. And even when I was there, I was doing group classes for kids, and in the summer and half terms, I was doing the activity clubs for kids.
That's
as well.
right.
Yeah. So I was always, and that part of the job I enjoyed more than the gym stuff.
That was the green top, wasn't it?
I was yellow top. It was a horrible bright yellow top. I couldn't get away from it. Even when they put me lead, I still had to wear this horrible yellow top. But just the enjoyment that everyone gets from physical activity, I prefer that much more than, I don't want to obviously slate the profession too much, but working one-to-one or with people in the gym, because I'm quite a selfish aspect. I'll train because I enjoy it. I don't have the patience for adults like I do for children when it comes to teaching.
That is so well. Okay, hold on. Do you know what? Because I think if you ask anybody, including me, you would think it would be the other way around, right?
Yeah.
That most people feel like they wouldn't have the patience for kids. Kids would be like a complete nightmare.
It's like, yeah, and a lot of people say that's the first thing is like, how do you work in schools? It must be like mad. How do you cope with the kids that do my head in? And there is days where the kids are like, they will do your head in. They will make you frustrated. They'll get you to a point where sometimes you start questioning, like, oh, am I doing the right job, or am I making an impact, or am I actually going to make a change in this person? But for me, when I was working with adults, especially because I was younger than a lot of the people that were coming into the gym at the time, they'd like look at me a certain way, and oh, you're a bit young. I remember someone actually said to me, "Oh, you're quite young for us," as if questioning. I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm a lot younger than the person who's now in front of me. But you don't get that with the kids. And I feel it's not every adult, but when you're trying to teach an adult something, they're less susceptible to want to take the information in than if you teach a child, because they're still going through the journey. Like, they're still early phase in their life where they're looking up to you because you've experienced everything they've experienced. You've experienced school life. You've experienced with your P lessons. You've experienced being a teenager. So they can look to you for advice because you've done everything. But someone older than me coming into the gym would look at me and think, "Oh, what life experience have you got? You're 20."
Do you know?
So what?
Well, it's really hitting me right now because whilst obviously the logical thing is just like, yeah, of course kids are going to be more difficult to manage, but so during like COVID and lockdowns, I was doing Zoom sessions with clients because that's all you could do.
Yeah.
And because they were all at home, I was now like meeting their kids.
Yeah.
And one of the people I was training, his kids would get involved in the sessions.
Yeah.
So what happened is suddenly, and he's got like 4 kids, right? 3 of them would get involved in the session. One of them more so in particular than the others.
Yeah.
And so now I found myself training these kids, and the speed at which they learned things and progressed was like insane.
Yeah.
I only had to tell them once, and they just knew it.
Yeah.
And the adaptations were occurring like super fast, and it was throwing me off that they were so compliant.
Yeah.
Right, like they're just there at the screen, waiting for the instruction. And it's like, I usually have to fill the gap with conversation, and I have to manage people's anxieties, all this stuff. The kids are just there.
Yeah. What's next?
Okay, cool.
It's similar to PE lessons. Like, I find it year 7s. So when you get year 7, I was teaching secondary. When you get year 7s, they are the keenest year group. So they're straight from primary. Everything's all brand new to them. So if you like capture them with engaging and enjoyable lessons, and at the same time throwing a bit of knowledge about the impact this can have on your lifestyle. Oh, do this regularly, you'll stay healthy. This will happen. You get these benefits. If you're leading a sedentary lifestyle, this might happen and this might happen. And you like plant that from an early age whilst making it enjoyable. It starts to develop habits, and they'll start to just naturally want to do things. Like, there's a guy I used to work with. He run the premises guys, so he did a lot around the building. Got 2 boys. He would train, and they were like, they're 7 and 9, but they'd follow him. When he trained, they'd copy. So then when he come and picked him up from school, he brought him to our school with a gym, and they'd be beckoning like, Dad, if he goes to the gym, and he'd have to like, right, cool, let me finish my work. But because he'd make it fun for them, and they'd just go and do it. And they'd remember the routine, they remember the workout, and they'd just do it without him saying so. So it's just like, I find working with children is so much more rewarding for me, because I can look at someone's journey from year 7 to 11 and say, do you know what? I had you in year 7. I know what you were like. I know that maybe you didn't quite enjoy football, for example, but we found something for you in that 5 years to make you enjoy a physical activity that when you leave here, you're going to carry on doing it. You're going to carry on, and then in 5 years' time, you know, oh yeah, no, I really like Mr. Weston's lesson. We did this, that, and the other. Like, he's the one that got me into this. He's the one that got me into that. That's what I like. That's what I do. Why I do what I do. Well, one of the reasons I do what I do.
Man, that is. You kind of almost sold me on what like, screw all of these adults that I've got like headaches for, right? No, I'm joking. They're not that bad, but yeah, it's. I can definitely see how it would be like really like rewarding. I guess I'm curious on one of the things I've been looking at a lot, like working with adults, and then kind of you always have to track everything back and kind of be like, right, well, you know, they are all doing really well now, but if they had started earlier, then it would have been better for them.
Yeah.
And the idea that we want society to like get earlier education about physical well-being, mental well-being, and all the rest of it. Now, obviously, you've been doing it for how long?
7 years.
7 years. So you've had time to see kids go through year 7 to year 11 and on to like sixth form, college or whatever. Do you feel like some of these kids, and I don't know what kind of demographic of children that you're dealing with, but was there like a positive social impact in terms of there were kids that maybe would have turned into much worse kids or much worse adults, but like being involved in exercise kind of helped them to find a better way for themselves?
Yeah.
Has there been anything like that?
I've worked in Stratford, and I'm currently working in Abbeywood. So, I mean, the demographic is in a lot of ways very different, but still within. So Newham technically is one of the poorest, most deprived boroughs in London. But post Olympics, when they've thrown up all these flats and put up Westfield and all these nice attractions, it's attracted a lot more people, and it kind of gets overlooked sometimes. There's still people living there that lived there pre-Olympics. So you have the people who still maybe working below the poverty line or around the poverty line. So you have a lot of kids who are struggling financially because of their parents' situation. Might be single parents, might be for whatever the reason. And it tends to be sometimes that route of doing other things outside of school is more appealing, because financially they want to see rewards, and that's why there's such a big thing in a lot of these areas where kids are enticed and groomed by gangs, because they look at vulnerable kids who maybe they know who are struggling, who don't have expensive things, and that's the way they lure the kids with expensive things. So it's such a big thing in schools now, extracurricular activities as well as morning clubs, to kind of, especially extracurricular, because that period between the end of the day and say like 5 o'clock, if there isn't anything available to keep those kids engaged, then where are they going? And then a lot of the time they're innocently hanging out in gangs in and around the school, just in big groups. But then from there, that's when trouble starts to happen, because students are picked off, students are groomed essentially for different things. So like getting students into after school clubs and having them distracted from other things is a big thing.
Trying my best to. I'm contemplating how much of my own story I should tell now. I don't think I'm going to say much at this stage, because that's actually a bit hard to talk about. But yeah, certainly in my time, I mean, we both come from the same area.
Yeah.
And where we come from, isn't exactly the most affluent place in the world.
No.
And so like even in our time, there was a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And yeah, I didn't really have anything between, 3:30 and 5 p.m. to keep me occupied. And I was obviously one of the kids that were out there, in these groups. And then whatever was going on. But yeah, there's a conversation I've had, actually one of the first conversations I came back on this podcast with, and it was I was talking to a guy called Harrison, and we're talking about his son, and the conversation was around like sort of like his son wanting all these different things, and then we were talking about how whether it's a good idea to be like buying your kids all these things, and is explaining them, are they then learning certain values? But listening to you there, it created another point for me. And you said that these gangs entice them with expensive things. And yes, you come from like a lower income household, like most of us did. Your parents can't really afford to give you all these things. Now we're in a different situation now.
Yeah.
We've maybe done a little bit better for ourselves, and we can maybe give our kids a slightly nicer life.
Yeah.
Right? But that's created another thing for me to be like, I can see now why it might be important to make sure your kids aren't like without the PS5 and without the Jordans and without the prime drink and whatever it is. Yeah. Because then it's like one less thing for them to get caught out on.
Yeah.
Out there, it's just like, well, I don't really need to, like, I can just ask my dad.
I've had that already. But yeah, I get what I'm saying, that it's that it puts a lot more pressure on parents. So there are pros and cons of what you're right in saying is, if a kid does have all that already or has access to those things, then they have no need to look elsewhere. But at the same time, if a parent or parents can't afford as much as they try to give their kid that kind of thing, it is about, but like saying that, it's very different times. Like obviously growing up, like you said, was very like similar things. My mum pretty much raised myself and my brother, and we would be like, we'd be out with our friends, but we were never kind of involved in any games. We weren't that way inclined. But we just play football or just hang around or just just do silly things, like innocent things, harmless to no one. That was
not that ginger.
Not that ginger. Yeah, I apologise to anyone. But I think it was because the way we were raised in the group that we had, that kind of appeal would never really get to us. Like, if someone had expensive things, I was like, okay, that's nice for them. Well, that's good for them. Or their parents must have really high paying jobs. It was never like, oh, I need to get that stuff now. What can I do to get that stuff now? And I never really had that desire. And I can't speak for every kid, obviously, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in particular areas, not every area, but in particular areas where kids might be more vulnerable or might, face more of a chance of being in that situation. You can't tell someone how to parent. It's difficult. It's a difficult situation.
No, I definitely, I've got massive empathy for that, and it is one of the things I feel some concern over is the pressure on parents. Like, you look at the rough statistics around the average income for a person. We're talking about cost of living, and then people who have kids that are then expected to keep up with like things are ridiculously expensive. Like PlayStation is like £500, games are like 70 quid, and then you're talking about trainers that are about 150 pounds. And then everything else on top of it, and then we're talking about phones with games on them that like charge you for like upgrades, and then all of that stuff. It's just racking up, and like there's too many people, a larger percentage, that can't afford to give their kids any of that stuff. And with going back to another conversation I had with another friend of mine, and he kind of makes sure his kids have like everything he can afford to give them. And I said like, why? And he was just like, bullying.
Mm-hmm. It's a huge, huge issue. But so one of my previous schools I worked in it was I believe it was a good way of trying to limit some of the reasons kids would be horrible to each other, because kids are horrible to each other for whatever reason. And a lot of the time it's about appearance. So the school that I worked in previously would set blanket rules for everyone. Like, you have to wear particular shoes. So you couldn't come in kickers, because kickers were seen as a more expensive, cool kind of shoe that people would have. Like 90% of students would have black wallabies. And then coats had to be plain. So no one coming in a big Canada Goose goes, there was not money being flaunted around by kids. Everyone had the same bag. The school issued backpacks. So everyone had the same backpack.
Wow.
So it's that in a way, because that's one less thing that you have to go somewhere. And it's one less. So imagine that you're coming from a home where you know that your parents can't afford these expensive things, and you feel pressure going in your first day of year 7. You're thinking everyone's going to judge you because you haven't got a brand on your coat or a brand on your bag or nice expensive shoes. And you go into the school and that's one less thing you have to worry about, because all the students are dressed the same. Personalities are all different, of course. Hair appearance is different, face is different, but the uniform is a collective. Everybody looks the same. And I found, having worked at the school I'm in now, which are all slightly different, and I was in my previous school, there's less conversations about money, brands, just going around the building hearing stuff. No one's really trying to show off with a big expensive coat, because everyone has similar plain coats. Everyone has similar shoes. Everyone has the same bag. So that, I thought, was a good way to tackle one of the issues. But yeah, there's so many more other than that. But it was a good help having that.
Kind of almost wish that was the case for adults too.
I thought Instagram would be a boring place if that was. Well, for some people, I'm not interested.
I think, Instagram has definitely made social media and the internet. It's made everything obviously a little bit more complicated, challenging, and I feel like it's harder to find people who are. And I say this in a very non-judgmental way, because I'm just observing this, so I'm saying this objectively. It's harder to find people that are thinking for themselves, mm-hmm. and not like being too swayed by the influencers that they engage with and they follow. And by the way, an influencer doesn't necessarily have to be somebody with 1 million followers. Mm. It could just be somebody who has a strong opinion that you kind of like engage and follow and agree with. And if you haven't maybe developed the ability to articulate your own thoughts and express yourself in a particular way, if someone comes along and speaks in a way that, it's just easier, and then regurgitate what they're saying. And even with myself, I always, like, when clients I work with, I always try and encourage them to not see me as some sort of like all-knowing. Like, it's fine if I get it wrong, you know, and you get to think about this for yourself. I'm not here to force or pressurize you into completely following my opinion on things. I will give you my opinion on things. If you don't do what I tell you to do, like, that doesn't mean that you've done anything bad here.
You just choose to do something.
You're an adult. My job is to give you the information. Is it like, but with kids, I suppose you have to be a bit more mindful about like how much, because you have to direct them to some degree, right? Mm-hmm. They aren't fully capable of making, like, you know, certain decisions by themselves just yet. Do you, I don't know, I guess it would be a bit, there's some tricky topics to drift into there, because I remember I had a friend of mine. You might have met him actually. Back when I was a personal trainer at the waterfront. There was another guy who was working alongside me. His name is Leon.
Yeah, I
remember Leon?
I just saw him the other week.
He's still like
floating around.
He's still floating around, and he still works with kids and everything else like that. And he works in a school, I think. And I think it was his partner who was saying it. And I was at a party, and they were all there. And it was about like, he has to make sure he dresses down and like looks as scruffy as possible, because Leon's quite a good-looking guy. and he's in a school with young girls.
Okay. Yeah.
So even though he's like, not making any sort of advances, not making any effort, completely like desexualizing himself, right? He's still getting unwanted attention. And to what extent do you kind of like, I don't know, how do you manage that?
It's it's the most uncomfortable aspect of my job. Like, I've experienced something similar. So your best thing, the first thing you try to do is just dismiss it. So I, being in a similar situation, I just would have a normal conversation with someone. I wouldn't try and, show any special attention. Morning, how are you? And I'll just keep it moving. I'd then ask a female member of staff, can you go and speak to this student, please? Because A, she's doing this. B, I'm really uncomfortable. And C, if it's not dealt with, it's going to be a safeguarding issue on her part.
100%.
So, yeah, it's just, when I first started teaching, it was difficult because you just worry, like, oh my God, did I say the wrong thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Have I said something to make her think that she should have an advance on me? Like, all these crazy thoughts are coming to your head because you're so worried about safeguarding, putting you in and saying, right, you did this, this and this, you lost your job. And in that profession, if you did something to a student, then you're on the register. You're no longer going to be working in schools. Like, it's such the fear of that kind of happening, even though you are completely innocent, is like a strange. It's just like hovers over your head. Like, you're just worried at any point you might say I'll do something. This is what I felt like when I first started. Then I was saying to myself, well, I'm not actually doing anything. I'm just doing my job. And it's just understanding that girls are going through a certain period in their life and they have like different feelings and emotions and they don't quite understand. And sometimes because you are a polite figure to them, it just naturally draws them to you. And then they don't know how they're feeling and they think that it's an attraction. And most of the time it's not. It's just because you're polite.
Yeah.
And it's just because you're not another 13, 14-year-old boy calling them names or hitting them or whatever it is, and the way they try and flirt. It's just, you are having a conversation, you're just being yourself. And that's the bit that once I realised, okay, I'm not actually doing anything, like I'm just putting pressure on myself for no reason. Had a few conversations with members of staff, and if there ever is an incident now where I feel like a female student is like being inappropriate or being forward, I just get either safeguarding or a female member of staff to say, look, can you go and have a word with her? Because I feel like if I did it, they'd be embarrassed.
No, and that's actually really, it's good that there's like that's a very clever way to go about it. It's good protocol in place and it's like quite well managed. I mean, I went to an all-boys school.
I don't know how. That'd be my worst nightmare.
And, we definitely fancied some of our teachers, no doubt about it. And, at that time when you're 12, 13, 14-year-old boy, right, you don't really think anything of it. You don't think anything's going to happen. There's a person in front of you, you find them attractive, all the other boys, we're all boys, right? We're just going to be talking nonsense. Yeah. But that's kind of like the extent of it. And is it different that when it's a male teacher and a female student?
Yeah, in the sense that the way female students are not as forward as male students. They're not. So I remember my experience similar to you. Some of the boys, I remember being in our PE class, A-level PE, on the topic of arousal, and we had 2 female teachers, and it was a boy-heavy class, and that was it. Like, everyone felt the need to make jokes and innuendos, and you could tell the teachers were laughing it off, but at a point you could see they felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't get that. I haven't experienced that with female students. Female students at a certain point will start to mature, and the way they communicate as well, even if they had feelings towards a male member of staff, they wouldn't be so open with it. They'd just be really friendly. So it's this a very different way of identifying between the two, because you kind of see if a female student will tend to spend more time coming to your office or coming to your department and speaking to you more often than probably they usually would. They're the key things to look out for. But boys, it's a bit like, they'll just be blunt, but like, oh, I miss your fit. And, straight away that you have to deal with that problem. Because it's inappropriate for many different reasons. So like, you just, it becomes more apparent when a male student has a feelings towards a member of staff than a female student.
Man, it's so, it must be so tricky, I think. And we're just looking at it on the spectrum of like the students being inappropriate, right? But obviously it goes terribly, terribly wrong sometimes. And where it's the teacher or the adult responsible for supervision who then starts becoming inappropriate. I think one of the things that got brought to my attention was, like, while schools will 100% have safeguarding policies in place, and I work in a chain of health clubs that have safeguarding policies in place as well. Like, I literally I don't work anywhere near children. I have to go through safeguarding modules every year and on how to deal with situations around children. But one of the ones that got flagged to me was religious institutions, so churches, mosques, synagogues, that kind of stuff, where children also go to these places. And from what I was told, and I didn't really fact check this, but they don't have safeguarding procedures in place. So children are actually at risk when they go into these places. And there's certainly been, from my impression anyway, a lot of stories over however many years of children being taken advantage of in these places. I'd like to hope that really at this stage it doesn't happen in schools at all anymore. Like, it's got massively clamped down, and
thankfully every school I've worked in, there's not been any incident like that. It's something that I can't begin to quite understand an adult's mindset when they want to take advantage of a child. Like, you look at the point, so you're employed by the school to provide a service to look after young children, to help this young person grow in front of you, and all that's in your mind is, I can take advantage of this child. I can't really explain how it makes me feel. Like, I've had incidents, but not involving staff, involving families. So it was, I can't disclose too much, but it was an incident where a student was experiencing something within the family, and I noticed big change in this person. So she just was one of the most polite students they'd ever come across. Was really active, and then just one day went really quiet, completely changed her style, wasn't talking to the same group of friends, was giving me kind of cryptic messages, was just talking to me and walking off. So telling me something that was out of character about herself and then walking off. So we flagged it to safeguarding. And then it turned out that, like I said, one of her family members was taking advantage of her, essentially. At the time, she wasn't living with her parents, she lived with another family member. And that other family, everyone knew. Everybody knew. Parents knew, and the nan knew. Everybody knew, but no one did anything. So one day she was found outside of school, just walking around late at night in the uniform, and was picked up by another family who lived by the school, but the girl went to school as well, identified her, brought her in, called the school, police were involved, and they ended up getting arrested. But at that point, the family member that was guilty of doing what he was doing was in the school. They pulled him into the school, and they closed off one of the areas where they were, so the police were on either side. And all I wanted to do was go into the room and rip his head off. That was all I could think about. I did teach my lessons, like someone covered me. I just sat in the office and I was like, I need to go upstairs to see this person, because you've essentially destroyed this young person for no reason. Like it doesn't make sense. It will make sense. It never will make sense. So that's why, yeah. When you have to work in a school, to work with children, you have to naturally care about young people. There's no two ways about it. If you want to be good at your job, if you want them to succeed, you need to care about young people. You can't go into the profession because you think, oh, you get lots of holidays, or our kids will be all right, I can just tolerate them. It doesn't work like that. You're involved in their lives. Like you have to be a teacher, you have to be a role model, you have to be a carer, you have to be a parent sometimes. You have to do all these roles to look after these young people. And there's no way that you can like take advantage of them or destroy them if you really care about your job, if you really care about the children. So when I hear about stuff like that, it baffles me. It really, really baffles me.
It was really, really bizarre thing I saw on YouTube. It's like Channel 4 do all these documentary shows. It was like really like 10 minutes long. Probably about as long as it could have been, but given the nature of it.
Yeah.
And they basically got this pedophile, right? This self-confessed pedophile to come in. They put like this bunny mask on to hide his identity, and they stuck him in front of these three individuals. So there was like two women and a guy. I think they were all parents. I recognized the guy because he's been on a podcast with somebody else that I know, and he's also been on one of the other documentaries. So he's an ex-offender, and now like runs a fitness facility and all this other kind of stuff. There was a lady, and then there was another lady who's like in a same-sex partnership and was adopted a child. So basically, three of them had to sit there, and they interviewed this pedophile who he says he hasn't done anything. The only thing that he's confessing to is the fact that he does have sexual feelings towards children. And it was, I've never quite seen something like that. And he obviously was trying to plead that sort of case that this isn't something I've chosen to feel. This isn't something I've chosen to have. I just have it. But I'm morally aware enough to not act upon those things. So here's where it gets a bit questionable, is that when they asked him questions, and then he was just like, yeah, so I have done volunteer work with children. And at that point, they're like, so you know that you feel like this,
but you're putting yourself
in and around children. And he goes, yeah, I know, but like I've never done anything. But it's like, well, why are you? So like, because what you were saying there about you have to care, you have to have that. You would naturally have that duty of like, I wouldn't do anything to put this child in any sort of harm, physical, mental, emotional, or any other kind. But to know that you are potentially capable of that because of these, instinctual feelings that you don't have any control over, yet you put yourself in that situation. I think at that point he kind of like lost them. Like you could see they were getting...
Yeah. Like you would naturally get angry. Like even now, it doesn't make sense. If you know, even if you claimed you've never done anything, if you know that any given point that you know that these feelings, sexual feelings towards, like as adults, towards other adults, are quite intense. And a lot of the time you might hear stories of people go, I don't want to do this, don't want to do it, but they do it anyway. What's to say that he won't have that moment where he just does it anyway because the feeling is too intense and that he can't control it. Because just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to happen. So then if he's putting himself in that environment, we shouldn't. If you really, like I said, if you really care about young people, you don't put them in danger. And if you are the danger, you can't work with young people.
No, it's to a slightly different extent. I even observe it, I guess, even amongst adults, right? And the whole sort of stereotypical guys, like chasing after girls, and sometimes that gets a bit inappropriate.
Yeah.
And whilst I do train women, I mostly train men, because I'm aware that even in personal training situations, and it happens a lot in personal training, where personal trainers sometimes take advantage of that sort of closeness in the working relationship they have with their client. And sometimes it happens the other way around too, and people do actually kind of end up meeting that way, right? Fair enough.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time it does come off as a little bit creepy and a little bit sinister. Now, I'm attracted to women, and whenever I kind of like see women, I have to ask myself, is the reason I want to speak to that person because of that person, or is it because I'm physically attracted to that person? And often it's just going to be because I'm physically attracted to that person, and so there's nothing else that I'm trying to gain from that interaction other than this attraction that I have, and then I just kind of like bypass it. I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'm then going to potentially be inappropriate in any particular way as a professional. In your own personal life, if you want to, take your shot with someone, you're free, right? But as a personal trainer, delivering a professional service, no, it cannot be driven by or led by my own sexual interest. And if it is, I would just have to like not go through with working with that person.
But even if, let's say, that for whatever reason you decided to act upon this feeling you had towards your female client, she as an adult has the ability and the understanding to tell you no. If we go back to that guy, that child, he could overpower a child. And that's what it is in a lot of the cases, because they're raped and attacked by these predators. So adults, you could say no, you can consent, you can not like do whatever you like. But a child doesn't have that same opportunity. When someone of a much older age and a much bigger size is making the decision for them, then what chance do they have? And as well, children are more susceptible to being groomed by whatever means. But children can be manipulated by adults. And like, again, going back to this guy, he's just sitting in my head now, saying that he will never act on it. But if he's acting a certain way because he feels a certain way towards a child, he's then essentially doing what he said he'd never do by trying to project his feelings onto this child, creating a relationship with this child. As an adult, you probably see that coming. You say, oh, they're getting a bit too close, or they're asking inappropriate questions. Don't have that same conversation with a child. Child's be like, oh, this person's nice. Oh, this person's friendly. Oh, this person's warm. That's what they're thinking. They're not thinking the same kind of things that we would do as adults.
Yeah, no, I very rarely interact with children.
It's tested.
And you do forget in a world where you're kind of mostly interacting with adults how susceptible children are to suggestion, and like how vulnerable they are. And I think I actually mostly wanted to talk about, I guess, the impact of physical education on like well-being for a person, and if it starts as a child, and how that then impacts them as an adult. But obviously there's a lot that happens in a person's life, and a lot of who we are now kind of stems from what happened to us as children. And I think that's probably why adults start to really care about what happens to children, because we've got to experience the impact of the experiences that we had, both positive and negative, on who we are today in our lives. And you kind of have this natural instinct to want it to be better for the next generation. In terms of like the school curriculum and physical education as it's kind of being delivered today, do you think we're doing a good enough job?
So on the curriculum, go back to the curriculum. So it's targeted at all four key stages. So there's key stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. Key stage 1 and 2 in primary school, and then key stage 3 and 4 in secondary school. And like, it's essentially a journey. So they want key stage 1 is about movement. Like key stage 2 is similar as well, like running, jumping. So like physical literacy throughout the first part of primary. Then they look at developing like hand-eye coordination, stuff like that. So skills that you'd need to take part in a sport or a physical activity. Then key stage 3, it's a little more developed through technique. So you introduce into a whole new world of sport. So you're looking at techniques of certain sports, like handball, for example. You look at passing, whereas you've been learning in key stage 1 and 2 to essentially move and start to use your hands a little bit and legs and a bit of coordination together. Key stage 3 is you start to develop that technique further, where you are looking at specific skills within a sport. And then key stage 4 is more about tactical awareness and strategies in games. And by that point, the aim is to have this well-developed physically and mentally student in front of you, where they have an understanding about why they need to do certain things in games, the importance of sport, the importance of exercise. And then they can apply that knowledge in a game setting where, okay, I know how to pass, but my teammate is being blocked by a defender. Who do I then pass to? Or if I'm being marked, how do I get into space? Just like little things like that. So it's...
What ages do correlates with each stage?
So age-wise, key stage 1, top of my head, I think it's roughly around 4 to 6, 4 to 7 maybe.
Okay, so it starts.
Yeah, key stage 2 is about 7 to 11. And key stage 3 is year 7 to 9. So you got your 11-year-olds to your 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. And then year 10 and 11 is key stage 4. So you have 14 to 16-year-olds. But so the curriculum itself is quite broad. So they want you to include, from the government, want you to include as many different sports as you can: dance, gymnastics, outdoor adventurous activities. So it is broad. There's huge scope to do what you want in schools. But then the pressure then falls on the school. So on paper, it looks great. It's like, oh, okay, kids should be getting all these opportunities, they should be doing all the activities. But then you dig a little deeper, then there's loads of stats, there's loads of data, there's loads of tracking progress, there's loads of displaying progress. So for example, if Ofsted came to inspect, they'd want to see a number of things happen in your lesson. So the school I'm in now, we have double lessons. So our P lessons run over an hour or 40 minutes, whereas other schools might only have an hour. And you have to factor in change in time as well. So again, that if you go school by school, some schools are doing it better than others, but that's because sometimes they have constraints. So you might be limited to space, funding, teachers, especially in primary school. So primary school, I'm going through my experience now because I've worked in primary schools as well. A lot of primary schools, I don't know if it's changed, but didn't view PE as an important subject. So it doesn't really get treated as a subject. So some schools I used to work in, for example, I'd had the students brought to me by the class teacher. That is essentially their PPA time. So that's their free period that they can plan or do what they need to do. And before the lesson started, quite often the teacher would say, oh, this person, they're not participating in PE today. They've been bad. And I say, okay, can't they miss their break? And she said, no, they need to miss PE. So first of all, I didn't argue it. Occasionally, I'd wait for a teacher to go.
Why not miss history?
Yeah, as I say, take them out of maths. Like, why not? But I'd put them into the lesson. And the teacher would go, I'd put them in the lesson and just let them participate. And I was like, right, whatever Miss needs to say to you now, she can go and say to you. And I think she got annoyed I was doing that, and she sat in the lesson and would just make these kids sit out if she'd asked them to sit out. Or they'd pull kids out to go and do reading in the middle of the PE. So the lesson wasn't valued by the staff.
Yeah.
So the kids started treating it as a second break. Because if they could miss it, surely it's break time. It's not a lesson. I've never been pulled out of my English lesson to go and do football.
Wow.
Like to play an hour of football when everyone else is reading and writing. The kids started to see it as an extra lunch. And it doesn't happen in every primary school, but a few that I've worked in, it's happened. So you're battling already, trying to, first of all, impose the importance of this lesson onto the kids. But secondly, I'd like present it as a lesson. Because if other teachers are telling you you don't need to do the lesson because you've been bad, they're not seeing it as a lesson, it's seen as a break.
But why do you think it is, like, you know, that these other teachers don't value PE?
Well, I think there's a couple of reasons. One of them, I think, personal experience. So, I mean, PE has evolved from when we were at school to now. And my mum has told me stories about PE when she was in school, and it's understandable why a lot of people have had bad experiences with PE, because it was essentially seen as another free period, or we're all going to do this sport, you're all going to take part, there's no excuses, even if you don't like it. Dodgeball, for example. Dodgeball seen as either, like, if you've got a mixed group and you've got a little vulnerable student against an absolute unit, it's going to cause issues. And that person getting hit with the ball every single time is not going to enjoy PE. They're going to start to dread it.
Yeah.
So they will just naturally stop doing it. So if you've had that experience growing up, you don't really see PE as a valuable thing to do. So when the lesson comes around, it's like, I don't want to do PE. You don't have to. And they'll just pull you out. So I think it's largely down to bad experiences, but I also think it's the fact that not enough teachers outside of the subject understand what goes into PE and how important it is. Because a lot of them will train and use the gym. A lot of them go for runs. A lot of them will take part in team sports, and they've got hobbies that involve them being physically active. And they've learned that through their life. And I don't think they match the two together. That it comes from us. We try to instill these routines in the children and these habits that they carry on when they leave school. Like, it starts here. So if you're starting to disrupt their journey by just telling them basically PE is important, then that's what they're going to carry on believing as they start to get older. And it is already a battle. So in secondary schools, when year 9 seems to be the year where you kind of lose participants in terms of like interest and engagement. And in my experience, it's largely the girls. Now, it's not everywhere I've been. So I've got a year 9's girl group at the moment at my school I work in, and they're unbelievable.
Year 9, they're what, 13, 14?
14, yeah. And so it's kind of like a pivotal role in their teenage years, and it's going through the main part of puberty, and all that kind of comes into play. And it's a lot more about their appearance, and they don't want to there's a lot of factors. So that's tricky enough as it is, trying to maintain levels of participation from year 7 to 11, and having that troubled year in between where you get the disengagement, you get the reasons, you get the excuses. The amount of girls that have come to me and given me notes saying, "Oh, sir, I'm on my period." I'm like, okay, cool. Physical activity can sometimes help relieve the cramp pain, so let's go. And they're surprised that I don't go, ugh, like, "Oh, you're on your period, let's not do this." But yeah, that's the year I find is more difficult. But I think if you had like a stronger system in place where PE is made to be fun and enjoyable and important, mostly important, from early years, and year 7 and year 8, I don't think you'd get such an issue. at year 9. I'm not saying it will help naturally. You can't change the way a young girl's feeling according to her hormones because she got through puberty or whatever it is. Like, you can't argue with that. And that's half the battle sometimes. But I think a lot of issues do come from the fact that PE isn't valued by other people or other staff outside of the subject.
What would you change about what we're teaching kids in PE, or even if we don't change, let's say, or what would you add?
I know some places do this, so I'd add more student voice. So you're not going to please every student in PE. It's impossible. But have sports in place, if your facilities provide us to do so, that the kids actually want to do. So, like the school where I'm at now, we'll do a unit of work called outwitting, where you could essentially, you pick sport, but you just have to show how you're tactically outsmarting your opponent, or how you're going to take advantage of the opponent, or how you're going to gain an advantage, sorry. And do it in football, you could do it in handball, you could do it in basketball, you could do it in netball, you could... Sometimes I ask the kids, like, what do you want to do? I'm going to take a vote. But I don't think enough places do that. So it's, if you're just structured and you're stuck in your ways, like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and they know what's coming, and they're like, oh. Because most of us don't like that sport. And it's like, you're then having a battle. Then you've got your behaviour management problems because these 3 really don't want to do it. Them 7 are bored. That 5 think, oh, that's all right. And you've got 3 who are really keen. So you're like putting out fires while them 3 really want to do it. And those 5 are walking away and those 3 are talking to each other. And it's like, can we change the sport? Can we do something different that actually these kids will want to do? And yeah, I've worked in schools that do really well. I've worked in schools that won't budge from what they do because sometimes it's tailored towards results rather than outcomes for the children in terms of like personal outcomes.
There was another thing that happened during the COVID lockdowns, and there's a gentleman called Joe Wicknor. I don't know if this is gonna go. And he was doing this sort of like PE for kids thing, and I remember at the time because when I was training my clients' kids, as soon as when they started training with me, they decided to skip the Joe Wicks thing, and they were like, "Oh, I prefer doing this stuff with us in the gym." And like one of my wants for kids, I spend a lot of time basically doing adult PE, right? I teach people how to squat. I teach people how to load their hips. I teach people how to push things. I teach them how to pull things. You know, I help them develop the strength to do like a pull up and all these kind of things, right? That if I even, do handstands with 60-year-olds, right? So it's like, these are all things that had they have gone through as children, it would be much easier for them to like be able to do that now. They'd feel a lot more confident in it. Essentially, I wouldn't have a job. And I don't have an issue with that. I don't have an issue with a much larger number of adults already kind of knowing that they can go to a fitness facility and they have a rough idea of how to use their body and they know an adequate amount of exercises to train themselves. And I realized that the best time for that to have happened was when they were in school. So they needed personal training in school rather than having to wait till they were adults and then like the tiny small percentage that can actually afford to hire somebody actually then getting help, and then on top of that an even smaller percentage just being lucky enough to get paired with a competent coach that has cared enough to learn how to coach these things and isn't just like winging it. Well, that's a tangent I'm not going to get into. I did actually have access to a gym when I was in school. So our school had like a little weights shed, and there was a pull-up bar, and there was dumbbells, and then like basically it wasn't guided or supervised.
Yeah.
But we would all just be allowed to go in there whilst the teacher was in there, and then we'd muck about with the weights, and it was cool. Probably, yeah. I don't actually fully remember what all the other kids. I used to do lots of pull-up kid stuff. How much of that is going on at the moment?
We have a very, very good facility at the school. So I'm trying to think of what we got. So we've got the cables with the pull-up bar between. There's 4 set of gym bikes, 2 skill mills, 6 treadmills, 5 spin bikes, 4 cross trainers, 4 rowers, dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells. So the school is equipped, and we have a unit of work called Exercising Safely, which we introduced from year 7. So we look at methods of training, including resistance training. We look at the importance of calories, energy expenditure, like everything. We cram into these sessions, and because I'm not new to my role at the school, just get settled down after half term. Every Tuesday after school, I'll be running the fitness session after school in the gym. So we do sometimes let them come in the mornings when we train as well. So there's a lot. Like, they have a lot of opportunity to train, and the kids at the school that do go have a real passion for it because they've started so young. They might have seen like people train. It's without sounding like kind of patronising. Kids are easily impressed. So if you could do a pull-up controlled, full range of motion, like, oh my God, and they want to learn. They just want to learn how to do a pull-up. Or if you lift, I was putting the dumbbells back on the rack, and it was like one of the 30s, and I just lift up the 30s, and I'm like, oh, what, you lift the 30s? So it's just literally like, yeah, this is where you start, and just go through. And it's when they've got an interest, it's really easy to keep them engaged. Especially if a starting point is doing a pull-up.
I won't lie to you, a lot of adults are like that as well. Also, I'm just like looking at them, I'm like, what do you mean?
A few people come running and say, why are you impressed by it?
Like, it's not that big a deal. Like, we literally just did that 10 minutes ago. You didn't. I know, but that guy's just so strong, isn't he? Like, yeah, sure.
There's a lot of similarities between men in the gym and kids in school.
All right, well, that's actually like, I'm really happy to hear that, first off, because I think, the bit that I'm about to ask, because I'm curious about, and like, how receptive have kids been, like, to engaging with this stuff? So, let's say you got 25 kids or 30 kids. And 30 is a nice easy number to work with. As a percentage, how many of them are kind of like, yeah, cool, I want to do more of this, I want to progress with it, I want to learn more, I like going on a regular basis? And how many are obviously maybe just neutral, like they'll do it if they're supposed to and they don't mind and they enjoy it when they're there? And then the group that are kind of just like, oh, sorry, got my kit.
Yeah, one serious. Yeah, got my kit. Yeah, left it on the bus. Yeah, those. The ones who don't want to do it are a small minority. So there's all the times I taught in this school previously as well. Did the same thing when I was there, and whenever I was in the fitness suite with the students, there'd be in a big class maybe 1, 2 who were really like, this isn't my thing, I don't want to do this, and would do the bare minimum in the lesson just so that they think that they wouldn't get in trouble or we wouldn't get annoyed. Did enough just to coast. Then you've got the bulk of the group who will do the session, sometimes enjoy it more, sometimes enjoy it, sometimes want to change it up, but I find it's mostly when they're doing continuous training. So I mean, I'm not a huge fan of continuous training. If you tell me to like walk on the treadmill for half an hour, I'd need music or a show to get me through it. So that's the kind of challenge. But when you're looking at things like circuit training, if you're looking at resistance training, which they're always keen to learn about, majority of the class will want to do it.
Both boys and girls.
Both boys and girls. I found that girls and boys work better when they're in single sex classes. So I worked with mixed classes, I worked with single sex, and I found, this is just in my experience, that when you have an all girls class or all boys class, you get better participation and engagement than you have a mixed class.
I find that's true with adults as well.
Yeah, but it baffles me because in primary, they do it in their classes and it's mixed, and they all participate. But if you said to them, right, get in groups, they tend to just drift. The boys will work with the boys and the girls will work with the girls.
I don't think the hormones have kicked in just yet.
No, but it's still the same in mixed classes now in secondary. If you said, right, if I allowed them to get into groups, 99% of the time it'd be boys being boys, girls being girls. Doesn't matter the level of ability of all the girls or all the boys, they just tend to drift.
All right, well, that's really promising to hear. It's pretty much why I kind of wanted to have this conversation. I was very curious about that. I'm very passionate about, everybody engaging in exercise, but there's a certain point where I realized, like, the penetration of this age demographic is a lot harder. If you're talking about elderly populations, even though it's massively beneficial to them, it's a much harder sell to the bulk of them. Some of them are like really keen because they understand the benefit of it. So if you can kind of just get to kids, which we've already kind of discussed, are way more open and malleable to suggestion. But if you offer them constructive suggestion that's like really positive for them and they absorb it there and then, it's like they're then doing that stuff as adults and they don't even realize it's something that they need any willpower for. It's just something they do. And doing a pull-up isn't an unpleasant experience for me. Doing a press-up isn't an unpleasant experience for me. Going for a run isn't an unpleasant experience for me. I've done it a million times, and there's less of a push to get somebody to be physically active. And of course, the knock-on effects of just overall as a nation or global society just being healthier in general, having less disease, and just people looking after themselves better. If we teach kids how to exercise, and in particular resistance train, then you're solving a lot of problems with a lot less funding. And then we can maybe get back to building cool buildings.
There's a problem I found with that is the myths. So there's a lot of things around children shouldn't lift weights. Now, if you look at any football academy, that like top level football academy that has footballers under 12s, under 14s, wherever they are, part of their routine is doing a gym session, and they do it under the guidance of someone who's competent, who knows what they're talking about, who knows how to lift weights safely, who knows it won't have an impact, who knows when to push them and progressively overload safely. There's no issue in these top, and they're producing some of the best footballers that the country sees. But then if I then want to show an 11-year-old how to squat properly, then parents sometimes have issues. My child shouldn't be lifting weights already. But yeah, that for me is the biggest battle, is dispelling this myth that children shouldn't lift weights. Because I think people might assume a child's going to walk into the gym and just start squatting 100 kilos. When, I mean, a lot of adults won't do that.
No, it's not that easy. Back to when we were working at the waterfront, right, and had junior gym, that 1 or 2 hours that kids could come in. They had like a 10 kilo limit machines, and there was a guy there at the time, Phil, who was also like one of the instructors, and his argument was like, look, they're allowed to do press-ups and they weigh more than 10 kilos. So we're okay with them pushing their own body weight, which is like, I don't know, like a lot more than the little machine, but they're not allowed to go past a certain point. It's ridiculous.
It didn't make any sense. And it wasn't resistance training, because weight would just fly. There'd be no force that they were pushing.
No,
It's
it
too.
was definitely a made-up rule.
Yeah, 100%. That was just a health and safety.
So we don't want to get sued.
Yeah,
So
it's just cover.
we can't get sued here. We don't really care if you end up actually getting anything out of it worth it. All right, Joel. Honestly, there's like a million more things we could talk about. But I'm going to wrap it up here. I'd definitely like to continue this conversation and probably have some other conversations with you as well, because, you know, for the context of the audience, me and Joel know each other in a number of capacities. You know, we work together in a few different ways as well. So not just Joel, the PE teacher, but Joel's a good friend of mine. And we've had lots of chats about lots of different things. Had they been recorded at the time, would have made for some insightful content. Joel is not really much of a social media influencer, so I'm not going to ask you where people can find you, because you probably don't want people looking you up.
You don't want to see pictures of me and my son, little kickers.
But yeah, it's listen, this has been fantastic insight into like what happens in schools, what happens with kids, and you know how things are looking. I think a lot of parents will be very curious to know more about what's going on, you know, when they're not around. But yeah, I'm sure when I replay this episode, I'm going to be like, wait, I did not expect that we were going to talk about that at all. So I just want to say thank you for coming down and doing that. And yeah, we'll definitely have another conversation, because there's so much more to talk about.
There it is. Cheers, Will.